The window watcher, it was a chilly autumn evening, and James was alone in his apartment, watching TV. He glanced out of the window and saw a man standing across the street, staring directly at his window. The man's face was pale, his eyes dark and hollow. James felt uneasy, but he tried to ignore it, thinking it was just someone passing by. Minutes passed, and James looked again. The man was still there, in the same spot, staring up at him without blinking. James felt a shiver run down his spine. He closed the curtains tightly and tried to focus on the TV, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. An hour later, curiosity got the best of him. He peeked through the curtains, but the man was gone. Relieved, James turned back to his show, only to feel a cold draft sweep through the room. He glanced at the window again and froze. The pale face was now right outside his window, staring at him through the glass, lips curled into a faint smile. James jumped back, his heart racing. He reached for his phone to call for help, but as he looked back, the face was gone, replaced by his own terrified reflection. He never saw the man again, but from that night on, he could never shake the feeling that someone was always watching him from the shadows. The forgotten phone Lucy was cleaning out her attic when she found an old, dusty phone at the bottom of a box. It was a vintage rotary phone, heavy and black, with a faded cord. Curious, she decided to plug it in to see if it still worked. As soon as she did, the phone rang. Startled, she hesitated before picking up the receiver. There was silence on the other end, followed by a faint, distant voice whispering her name, Lucy. She hung up quickly, her heart racing. The phone rang again, this time louder and more urgent. She picked up again, but all she heard was static, followed by the same voice, now clearer and closer. Lucy, I'm coming. Panicked, she unplugged the phone and threw it back into the box. She turned to leave the attic, but then she heard it, the phone ringing again, even though it was unplugged. Slowly, she turned back, and as the ringing grew louder, she saw the rotary dial turning on its own. The whisper came again, right next to her ear this time. I'm here. Lucy dropped the receiver and fled the attic, slamming the door behind her. She never went back up there, but sometimes late at night, she could still hear the faint ringing from above. The midnight knock late one night. Emma was home alone, curled up on the couch with a book. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Suddenly, she heard a soft knock at the front door. Startled, she glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. She hesitated, thinking it might be the wind, but the knocking came again, a little louder this time. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She got up and cautiously approached the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing but darkness. Who's there? She called out, but there was no answer. The silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. She took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and opened it slightly. The cold night air rushed in, but there was no one outside, only the empty street illuminated by a dim street lamp. As she closed the door, she heard the knock again, but this time, it came from the back of the house. Emma's blood ran cold. She turned slowly, feeling the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The knocking grew louder, echoing through the empty rooms. She crept towards the back door, hands shaking, and opened it with a trembling hand. Again, there was no one there, just the darkness of the backyard. She quickly shut the door and locked it, her breathing heavy and rapid. Then, she heard a whisper right behind her ear. You shouldn't have opened the door. Emma spun around, but no one was there. The knocking stopped, and the house fell into an eerie silence. She stood frozen, listening, but all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. She never heard the knock again, but from that night on, Emma never stayed home alone after midnight. The rocking chair in an old house on the outskirts of the city. A small family lived. A mother, a father, and their young daughter, Layla. They had recently moved into this house after finding it for a very low price. They didn't know the reason behind the low price, but they were happy to have a new home. One night, as the family was getting ready for bed, Layla heard the creaking sound that was coming from the next room. It sounded like the movement of an old rocking chair. Curious as ever, Layla got up and went to the room to check the noise. When she entered, she saw an old rocking chair in the corner of the room, slowly rocking back and forth, even though no one was sitting in it. A chill ran down her spine, but she thought the wind might be moving the chair. She returned to her room and tried to sleep, but the sound did not stop. Each time she listened, the chair seemed to rock faster. She tried to ignore it, but she couldn't sleep. The next night, the same sound occurred again, but this time it was closer and more distinct. Layla decided to tell her parents, but they didn't believe her, thinking she was imagining things. However, on the third night, Layla heard the noise again, and there was no doubt that the chair was rocking by itself. She decided to be brave and entered the room once more. When she stepped into the room, she found the rocking chair moving violently, as if an invisible person was sitting in it. The room was unnaturally cold, and she felt a cold breath brush against her face. Suddenly, the chair stopped moving, and she heard a whispering voice say, "It is not yours." Layla ran out of the room in a panic and slammed the door shut behind her. She told her parents again about what had happened, so they decided to check it out. When they entered the room, they found the rocking chair still and nothing out of the ordinary. But from that night on, the chair never stopped moving at the same time every night, rocking until dawn. And the whispering voice continued to echo throughout the house, as if the chair was waiting for someone to sit in it and uncover its mysterious secret.